Hi everyone, let's go ahead and take a look at section 2 here of chapter 18, and this is looking and focusing on blood plasma. So we're going to talk about the functions of plasma and all the different components of plasma, and of course what those components are responsible for as well. So plasma is mainly water, 92% is water. And then you're going to have these things called plasma proteins that are floating around. We're going to go through the different proteins that we find in plasma, about 7%. And the dissolved molecules and ions is going to make up 1%. So this is going to be where you have like your hormones and your enzymes and your different ions, electrolytes, gases, all of that good stuff that's going to be found in the plasma. So plasma is basically that extracellular, it's an extracellular fluid. And again, I mentioned this in the section prior to this, but it's very similar to interstitial fluid except for the fact that there are these plasma proteins. I mean, it gets its name, plasma proteins. They're going to be found in the plasma. And that's usually where they stay as well. We'll talk I believe it's chapter 20, where we talk about how sometimes they can leak out, but usually they stick to their name. So let's first talk about this whole idea about how blood is considered a colloid. It's this homogeneous mixture that large substances are going to be floating in. And really one thing that makes it this colloid are going to be these large plasma proteins. There's albumins, there's globulins, there's fibrinogen, there's other clotting proteins as well. And pretty much all of them except one we'll talk about later on is going to be produced by the liver. And really the main thing that plasma proteins do is they are going to exert this colloid osmotic pressure. And osmotic pressure is basically going in and making sure that fluid is going to be balanced inside of the bloodstream. It's going to make sure that maybe we don't lose fluid from the blood, or if we need to get fluid, then it can be reabsorbed. So it really is going in and helping maintain blood volume and blood pressure. So we'll look at later on, again, once we specifically talk about the dynamics of the capillaries and of the blood vessels, we will talk about what happens if plasma proteins are decreased and how this actually affects how blood is being filtered through the capillaries. So we'll get into that later on into the couple of chapters ahead. So let's take a look at a couple of these, or focus a little bit more on these plasma proteins. First, starting with the most abundant of all the plasma proteins, and that's going to be albumin. About 58% are going to be albumins, and they're actually the smallest of the plasma proteins. This is going to have the biggest thing that they do is they are going to have the largest effect on the colloid osmotic pressure. So if we lose a lot of these albumins, then that fluid balance is going to go awry as well. So we want to make sure that albumins are going to stay constant in the bloodstream. They can transport as well. They transport a lot of these kind of lipid molecules. So hormones, a lot of hormones. We talked about how you have some lipid-soluble hormones that need to be transported around. Well, here's some albumin, and that is going to be how they transport around. But they can carry ions and things like that, and other lipids. Now let's take a look at globulins. They're the second largest of the plasma proteins. You have alpha and you have beta globulins, but you also have gamma globulins. So albumins are made in the liver along with these alpha and beta globulins as well. So the main thing that these alpha and beta globulins do is they also transport. So they do have a little bit part in osmotic pressure, but again, anytime if there's a question or anything about osmotic pressure comes about, it's mainly albumin that's going to be the greatest colloid osmotic pressure protein. Gamma globulins are going to be the ones that are not made in the liver. We're going to talk about how they are going to be produced by these special cells in the immune system, because gamma globulins are basically immunoglobulins or antibodies. And this should be this little, this plays a part in body's defenses. That goes with this right here. So make sure you know that It doesn't go with all globulins. It actually is specifically for gamma globulins. That should be kind of moved off and to the side underneath that. But I didn't get to it. Let's take a look at the last plasma protein that we'll look at, fibrinogen. Fibrinogen makes up about 4% of total proteins. They play a huge role in clotting. So not only does calcium play a role in clotting, remember we talked about calcium in chapter 17, so do platelets, but so does fibrinogen. So we'll talk about that whenever we get to hemostasis later on and its importance in converting these insoluble fibrin strands. So and it's just going in and telling you what serum is. Serum is basically plasma where all the clotting proteins are removed. So I guess a fun fact. Interesting. And there's also, I know I said fibrinogen is going to be the last plasma protein that I talked about. I'll mention regulatory proteins, but you do have some regulatory proteins in there. There's not a whole lot, less than 1%. Let's take a look at these other solutes that's going to be floating around. It's in plasma. So plasma is water, plasma is plasma proteins, and other substances in plasma is going to be gases, electrolytes, nutrients, waste products, and things like that. And they're all floating around, moving around inside of the bloodstream. So here's a nice little chart that goes in and kind of breaks everything down for you if you need a little bit more. It goes way more into sodium, potassium, it's good to make sure you know your electrolytes and your nutrients and respiratory gases. But don't worry so much about the functions right now. I mean, we'll go through those as we get to it. We'll go through electrolytes in the fluid and electrolyte chapter. Hopefully you already know the functions of these nutrients. We'll go through gases later on and waste products later on. And again, it's going through electrolytes a little bit more. Wouldn't worry so much about that either and all the normal ranges and functions. But it's just, again, a little bit more here. It's telling you some more stuff found in the blood plasma. So blood plasma is a happening and busy place, right? Again, don't worry about these functions over here for all of this. Yeah, so that is plasma in a nutshell. So what we're going to take a look at next in section 3 is going to be the formed elements. And so that's going to be our erythrocytes, that's going to be our leukocytes, and that's going to be our platelets. So until next time.